Hello, this is Danny from CG Dreams, and in this video I'm going to be helping a user on Cinema 4D CAF regarding displacement map. Now, I had already explained in the thread some potential issues, but I'm going to cover them more in depth in this video. The first thing is ideally for any polygon model is you want to have it all quads. You can have triangles in there, here and there, but it's always advisable to have all quad polygons because they work better with the modeling tools such as edge slice. You have to have a edge to edge opposite each other in order for the tools such as slicing to work. So let's have a look at, say for instance, this plane, and we'll just have a look at this just very quickly. You'll see that we've got an opposite edge to this edge, and this edge has got an opposite edge to this. This is quad polygon. This means that when you do modeling tasks, the modeling tool is going to understand how to deal with things like slicing. It's going to be able to look at the opposite edge to where it's coming from and find one. With a triangle, you're not going to be able to have such luxuries with these modeling tools because there is no opposite edge. So if you're going to slice from here, the slice tool is going to look for an opposite edge, and there isn't one, so it's either going to go that direction or that direction. This means you're not going to be able to plan out your topology, your edge flow, and edge flow is absolutely essential when it comes to polygon modeling. Now, because this model is made up of all triangles, this kind of eliminates you taking the model any further or making any other changes to it. But more important than that is the service, some issues that you're going to have at render time, and one of the issues I'm going to bring up is called poles. Now, a pole is when you've got 5 or more polygons sharing the same vertex. So as you can see here, I'm going to select this vertex right there, okay, and you've got multiple polygons sharing the same vertex. So let's have a look. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The more you have, the worse it's going to get. This basically creates a bad structure for the surface, and when it comes to applying displacement maps in particular, or even just smoothing, subdivisional smoothing, you're going to get a problem right here. And sometimes in the industry you'll hear people say a star, because that's exactly what it causes. It causes a star. So to illustrate this, I'm going to just use the interactive renderer. I'm going to bring it over the model, and hopefully you can see this quite clearly, but you should better see a star, and this is because right there is your vertex, and then outside this you've got all of your polygons. And a subdivisional surface like Catmull Clark doesn't like to deal with these. It doesn't understand what it's going to do with these. So you're going to get these kind of artifacts. And unfortunately your model is absolutely full of poles. So you're not going to get a very even surface. You're going to have all of these artifacts all over the model, as you can clearly see. So I'm going to just point out the obvious ones. There you go. Poles, poles. You're going to get all these creases appearing all over it. Look, you've got these creases. Now, for some organic surfaces it may not matter. You may like that kind of organic look, but most people do not want to be seeing these creases all over their model. And this is all from having poles. As you can see, I'm pointing out quite a few of them here. So poles are a no-go. The more curvature there is to the surface, the more of an issue there's going to be with it. So generally in 3D modeling, when you have to apply a triangle, you would put it on a flat surface as possible. Then you're unlikely to get a render error. When it comes to poles, they're unavoidable because you generally have a pole. Intentionally, you have to have a pole at some point to change the direction of the edge flow. And generally, for a good modeler, they'll try to get the pole to be on as flat surface as possible on the model, especially not on an area where it's going to articulate for animation. So that's the first thing that I wanted to bring out is these poles. N-gons, that's polygons of more than 4 sides, just want to avoid 100%. So you don't have to avoid triangles, but you need to be careful where you put them on your model, and you definitely need to be careful where you have poles. But unfortunately, you've got poles all over this model. So if that's not the look you're after, then you will have to remodel this or do a retopology of this, which I won't go into because that's a separate subject. Now the next thing is getting down to displacements itself. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the texture that was provided with this to the model as a color channel, so we're going to be able to see more clearly what's going on with the surface. So I'm going to grab this texture, go to the color and apply it there. This is one way that you can have a look at your surface and see how good your UVs are without having to do any rendering. So let's have a look and see what we've got here. I'm going to take the luminance off or anything else, even bump, so we can see what this texture is doing on your model. Now you can see you've got all of these funny artifacts there. It's not part of the texture. The texture is actually an evenly distributed set of like little tiny dents, although this texture is not ideal, and I will also explain why if you want evenly distributed dents over there. So what I'm going to point out first of all is these elongated dashes here are supposed to be looking like this, but round. Before I go any further, just so we can see things a little bit better on the screen, what I'm also going to do is open up my texture, and in the editor you can choose what kind of quality the texture is going to show in the viewport. I'm going to take this up a little bit higher so we can really see clearly what's going on. So let's have a look. Much more clearer now. So these, each one of these supposed to look a little bit like that, apart from even these are not even round. I mean, that's more round, that's more oval. And this is because of two things. And the main thing that I'm going to point out is your UVs. If you're not familiar with UVs, then I would highly suggest that you look thoroughly into this, because it's an integral part of the modeling process, especially when it comes to putting maps on your model, texture maps. So when we look at the model, you'll see here and I just held the shift key, by the way, when I double clicked on this UV tag. You'll see here that the UVs are a mess. Now what makes or constitutes as being a mess is when polygons are overlapping each other. This 2D space, which is exactly what it is, should be a 2D mapped version of your 3D model. So you don't want to have any overlapping UVs. Now this is really essential if you're going to be applying maps on a UV coordinate based type of mapping, and in your particular case this is exactly what you've done. So if I was to go onto this material in the object manager, you'll see here the projection type is set to UVW mapping. This means it's going to rely on this UV map. So essentially it's going to put this texture that you've got and fill this entire map space and then just apply it straight over it. And because it's a mess, you're going to get a mess visually as well. And you can see here that that's exactly what you've got. You've got a mess visually. Now this is another reason also why you would want to stick to quads as best you can, because you're going to be able to find it way more easier to find the seams that you're going to need in order to unwrap your model. There's no definitive loops that you can select on this model to do this, although because it's not that high polygon you could do it, but it's far from optimal. So your UV maps is important, and the type of projection that you're going to be using for your texture is very important as well. So if you don't want to use your UV map, the other option is to choose a different type of projection type. The obvious one would be for this a spherical one. So this is going to project it based upon the geometry shape rather than the UV map. And you can see instantaneously when I change it to spherical, we're going to get much better distribution, although it's not perfect, as you can see there. Now the problem when you're doing working with this is that you're lacking some options for procedurals, because it's not a procedural. If you was to apply a procedural texture, you've got a lot more options, and I'll show you that in a minute, but it still doesn't get away from the fact of the type of projection that you're using. So one thing that you can do with procedurals is increase the scale and decrease the scale so that you can have more or less dots all around the model. The way in which you do it in this particular way is by using this tiles U and V. The problem with this is it doesn't really do anything other than just scale the whole entire texture, and then it will start to kind of sew on, if you'd like, a texture against a texture if you're going to be making it smaller. This means you're likely to get the edges of the texture showing on your model when you go to render. This is especially the case if you've got non-seamless textures. Seamless textures are designed to be scaled so that you don't see the edges or the boundary edges of the texture. It looks so it's continuous. So if you do want to go this route, I suggest that you pick a seamless texture specifically designed for this. And it may be the case that this is a seamless texture, it could well be. So that's going to here. I'm going to say put 12 by 12, and then you'll see here now we've got significantly more dots. Okay, so let's take that down to say 8. Okay, that's looking a little bit better. Bearing in mind that these dots are more ovals, it's not ideal. To get around this, what you can do is you can change your length on the U and V. You can see there, as you do that, it starts to stretch it out in one way, and then it will give you something which is more round for those dots. So that's something that you can most definitely do. So let's get that interactive render on there. Now we've got a better distribution of those dots. I can then go in there and just choose to say, well, do you know what, I do not want that to show anymore, but I would like to have that working on my model. Now, because of the reasons that I've already mentioned, you're probably not going to get the results you want. You can clearly see these lines like a beach ball. This is where we've tiled the map, and because we've applied it as a displacement, it's going to pick up this. Now this map here is not ideal for displacement, and I'll tell you why. Because displacements rely on the colour information, or the grayscale information to be more accurate. Because this is, let's just show you this, we click on edit. Because we've got an area on this map which is lighter, you can see here, all of this area here is lighter. It's going to apply the displacement differently here than it would be, say, up here. Because up here we've got a white dot and an almost pure black backdrop to that white dot. Here you've got a grayscale of probably 40%, so about 40% grayscale here, and then of course you've got your 100% white. You're going to get different results because of this. So when you want to apply even dots all over your model, you need a black and white map ideally, or a consistent map across the whole area. So hopefully you can see from this, you've got a map issue, you've got pole issues on there, and you've got a UV map issue. In addition to the fact that your model is made up of all triangles that have multiple poles on them. You see these poles. Another thing that is often desirable to avoid is these type of triangles. They create nasty edges at render time. There, as you can see, there it's not very nice to look at visually as well when you're going to be looking at your model, especially if you're creating a portfolio. You do not want to be showing this. You want to be showing your rendering skills. Another thing that you want to avoid is what's called kite polygons. They're basically triangles, and let's see if I can find one here. There's quite a few, and a kite polygon is a four-sided polygon, but it's kind of upright, it's vertical. Can't see any there because you've got all quads in there, but I just wanted to bring that out. If I was just to remove these. Okay. It doesn't work like other modeling applications. A dissolve's got a specific button to it, and that's so irritating. Dissolve should be a backspace on all 3D applications, in my opinion. It's something that you just do continuously, not look for a button in the UI. But there we go. So I will stop there, but before I do, let's just briefly look at a solution to this. You can do what I've already mentioned so far. You can go in there and create a much better UV map. This UV map is not ideal. The UV map is not even generated at all. It looks like you used a polygon reduction on this by the name of the actual file. Keep it all quads if you can. You want to keep it all quads. It's going to open up opportunities for you to do further modeling on it. So UV map you're going to need. Before UV map, you're going to need to decide whether you're going to remodel it, retopologize it, or leave it the way it is. The next thing is the type of mapping. The type of mapping would be either spherical when you've got a bad UV map or no UV map, or if you've got a good UV map, you would use something like the UVW mapping. Therefore your texture is going to wrap around it as you would desire it. Although with spherical objects there is a little bit more that you've got to take into account when it comes to UV in. There is a particular way to UV a spherical object in order to get an ideal projection. And then the other thing was, as I mentioned, the actual displacement texture map itself is not ideal either. But before I go, I nearly forgot. I wanted to talk about the alternative to this map, which is procedural. So if you go down to here to texture and you go to surfaces, you click on tiles, and inside tiles you're going to have the options. and the pattern be circles. Okay, you've got different types in there for a grid. You can alter these colors to be black and white, so that you're going to get really consistent values in there. I won't spend too long on this, but just to give you an idea. Okay, so it's going to be very definitive with that, and because it's procedural, what you can do is you can bring down the global scale, and it's going to generate more and more dots on there. Of course, we're dealing with displacements. We can do a minus 0.5 or something like that and work our way from there. In the displacement settings, you are going to want round geometry turned on, and the subdivision level needs to be high enough that it's going to be smooth in your render. So this is using a more procedural way of going about things. Depending on obviously the type of tiles that you want, the colors that you select is going to be obviously giving you the results that you want, but I will leave that to you to discover. This would probably be more desirable, something like that. So you've got that there, but just bearing in mind that because you're projecting on there, okay, you're going to get tighter areas and things like that. You can change the direction of it, the U and the V. But if you look on the top here, see what's happening there. So I hope this has given you a little bit more insight in which direction to go in. As you can see here, there's pros and cons of the different routes that you're likely to take, but if you want the ultimate results, then you want all quads. You want evenly distributed shape and size of those quads around the model, clean geometry, a clean UV map, and a good procedural texture such as you see in here. Okay, or a texture actual map itself which is resembling something like this. The good thing about going to the procedural side of things is you've got options. You can change things in here, so that's one way of going about it. But if you want to go the pure texture map, UV map route, then you need to take that into consideration. But in order to do that, you're going to have a UV map, otherwise you won't get very nice results at all.